What is Rotary? We're a network of people like you. In fact, we're the original social network. More than 1 million of us live just about everywhere you can think of. And we mean everywhere. We get together to exchange ideas, grow our businesses, and make new friends. We volunteer to help our own communities or someone else's. We're right around the corner. Come join us. The name is Rotary. Rotary International.
Well, the time has come, and it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Without a doubt, she may be the most famous speaker I've had the opportunity to introduce since I've been president of Rotary in short 2 months, but anyway. She's no stranger to some of you. She's been to our club twice in the last few years. I think 2017, Harold and I were talking, we were unable to be here at that time, but we missed her. We regret that. We look forward to what she has to say to us today. She is a certified public accountant in her 3rd term as North Carolina's elected state auditor. She is a longtime public servant with nearly 25 years of auditing experience, having worked in the auditor's office for nearly 10 years before her election in 2008, and also in the state treasurer's office. Please join me by standing and give Ms. Beth Wood a warm Rocky Mountain welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate so much, again, the opportunity to come back and speak with this wonderful club and to be able to talk about what the State Auditor's Office is doing. Because I have been here twice, I won't spend as much time on some of the sort of getting you up to speed on the State Auditor's Office. I will do sort of a quick review of who we are, what we do, who we do it to, and then talk about, there's a couple of things that I want to speak to in particular today, a couple of issues that I think are important to say as I go out and speak to Rotary clubs. So, very quickly, just want to set the stage again for what it is we're doing in Raleigh. $43 billion, $43 billion is the operational budget being spent annually in Raleigh to run our state government. Department of Transportation, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Public Instruction, $43 billion. And that money's coming into Raleigh in 2 different sources. One is what we call general appropriations, and that is simply monies out of your pocket straight into Raleigh. Out of the $22 billion, there's a $22 billion pot and a $21 billion pot making up the 43. Out of the $22 billion pot, $11 billion is coming in annually in state income. $11 billion. When we go out and make purchases, another $6 billion coming into Raleigh from sales taxes that you and I pay. If you own your own business, another $1 billion in corporate taxes, and for all of us that drive, another $1 billion in gas taxes. 19 of the 22 in those line items coming directly from our pockets into Raleigh. And then there's another $21 billion pot. It's federal grant money, but it's simply federal taxes that we all pay, goes to Washington, D.C., and then comes back to the state of North Carolina in the form of grants, Medicaid, food stamps, money for clean water and air, money for building our roads and our bridges, money for student financial aid for students at community colleges and universities. So again, State Auditor's Office, our job is to audit these tax dollars, report how well or not they've been reported, how well or not they've been accounted for, and more important, I think, to you and I, did you waste any of my tax dollars? The news ain't no better than it was in 2017. Who do we do this to? We audit state of North Carolina. So we audit the state agencies. We audit 17 universities, 58 community colleges. I audit half 1 year, half the next. So the community colleges on an every other year rotation. We audit the 100 clerks of court, and we're auditing 25 a year, so they're on a every 4th year rotation. Now, I want to remind everybody, when you hear the term audit, We have not looked at every dollar. We have not looked at every account. We haven't even looked at every state agency or every department in a university or a community college. We have not looked to see that every state employee had not cheated on their timesheet. That is not what's being done in an audit. Be careful when you hear the word audit. State Auditor's Office does several different types of audit. I'm going to go into a couple in very much detail. But first and foremost, we're spending a lot of time on financial statement audits. We do a financial statement audit on the $43+ billion in the state of North Carolina, a financial statement audit at each one of our universities, at each one of our community colleges. But when we go in and do a financial statement audit, and for those of you who sit on city council, board of commissioners, trustees for a university, a community college, or a not-for-profit, this is critical. When we go in and do a financial statement audit on any one of these organizations, this is what you're getting. The organization is required to prepare for us, the auditors, the financial statements. I got a balance sheet. This is what do I own, what do I owe, what's my bottom line forever to date. We got an income statement. This is the money we took in. Here's the money we spent. Here's what's left over. Do we make money, lose money, break even? We got a cash flow statement. All the cash that came in the door, all the cash that was spent, is it positive or negative? Negative cash flow ain't never good. And then there's a ton of notes that speak to these numbers. And the state auditor's office, or any auditor, whether it's a county, a city, a school board, a not-for-profit, or the state of North Carolina, or university, when we audit these numbers, we will opine on whether or not they're fairly stated. Now, if you've heard me speak before, when I say I'm going to opine on whether or not they're fairly stated, what adjective did I not use? I never said they were accurate. I ain't signing that. What I'm telling you is in a financial statement audit, I'm saying, or any CPA is saying, there ain't no big errors in these numbers, okay? Because they're users of these financial statements, creditors particularly, your SACS accreditation boards. They want to know that these organizations are financially stable. And what you've got here are numbers in financial statements at the end of a year, and for that year, that opinion is saying those numbers don't have any big errors in it. It does not tell you there's no fraud. Imagine that. It doesn't tell you there's no wasteful spending. It doesn't tell you any of that. Prime case and example, I'm sure y'all have heard about the Wake County Clerk of Court. $2.3 million missing over 8 years. And that's all they can identify because that's as far back as the records go that they can track it. $2.3 million over 8 years out of the Wake County, I'm sorry, not Clerk of Court, Register of Deeds. Register of Deeds, okay? The county was getting a financial statement audit every year, and $2.3 million went missing. Do you know why? Because the Register of Deeds office and all the monies that go through there are immaterial to the financial statements for Wake County as a whole. If we audited every account, every dollar, you couldn't afford the audit and we'd never finish, okay? So you are taking some risk. And here's a prime example of a financial statement audit being done every year, and fraud was going on under their nose. Understand what your financial statements are and what they aren't. That's critical if you sit, again, as a county commissioner, a city council member, and somebody walks in and says, we had our financial statement audit, no findings, everything's great. No. All it's saying that the numbers on this piece of paper ain't got no big errors in it. That's all it's saying. The next type of audit that we do, you know, I said we got $21 billion of federal grant money. Well, that money's coming in, Medicaid, food stamps, like I said, money for bridges and building our roads. We're now switching from, we audit those federal grant monies, and we send a report back to the federal government saying how well or not the state of North Carolina administered these grants. This is about compliance. So with every program, every federal program we get, there are federal regulations, what you can spend the money for, what you can't spend the money for, what you're supposed to be using it for, what you're supposed to be accomplishing with the money. And the state auditor's office is auditing those grants, and we are reporting back to the federal government, the federal agencies, on how well or not the state of North Carolina administered those programs. Now, we send findings back to the federal government, and the consequences to those findings are that the federal government can come back and ask for reimbursement of monies already spent. Now, the state of North Carolina is financially healthy, but we ain't got hundreds of millions of dollars to send back to the feds that we've already spent. So making sure that we are spending those federal grant monies in compliance with grants. The next type of audit we do are performance audits. This is where I think citizens of North Carolina are so, I think this is what's closest to their heart. Because what our expectation is, you take all these tax dollars that I pay into Raleigh and you spend them wisely. You accomplish what you need to be accomplishing. So in the $43 billion that the state of North Carolina spends every year, we spend in state and federal money $14 billion in the Medicaid program. As health insurance for those that can't afford it, the state of North Carolina spends $14 billion of the 43 in Medicaid. We spend another $14 billion in education, $11 billion in K through 12, 2+ in our university system, almost $1 billion in our community college system. Think about that. We've got $43 billion to spend, 14 in Medicaid, 14 in education. So the difference in the two, Medicaid is an entitlement program, meaning that we will spend and pay for the bills no matter how big they are. To give you an example of that, we have a significant number of citizens in North Carolina who are on Medicaid. Their medical bills are over $1 million a year. There is no cutoff, there is no cap, there's no ceiling. If their medical bills are $1 million a year, we will pay that. Unlike our education system, we get to make decisions about how much we're going to give a teacher a raise or not. We can talk about and make decisions about if we're going to buy textbooks or computers, technology. We make those decisions about the 14 built in education, but there is no decision about the Medicaid money. So the state auditor's office is working and has been working for a number of years on making sure that the Medicaid spending is under control. We're spending it where we should. We've got 10 million citizens in North Carolina, 2 million are on Medicaid, okay? And we're spending $14 billion a year. In the past, we have spent about $3 billion in managed care organizations. And that's where I enroll with some organization and they go out and find my health care. Or we've spent the other $11 billion in fee-for-service. So I'm on Medicaid, I go to the doctor and the bill gets paid. We're getting ready to move the vast majority of the program into managed care organizations, where I will enroll in Medicaid, I will enroll in some managed care organization, and they will go find my health care for me. We pay the managed care organizations a per member per month, every month, okay? And if that rate is too high, they make a profit. If that rate is too low, they go in the hole. So we found out we have 7 MCOs in North Carolina right now that we're giving this about $3 billion to. And we thought before we move the whole program towards total MCOs, let's see how the 7 we have are doing. So what we found is that in those 7 MCOs, they've accumulated about $2 billion over 6 or 7 years. $2 billion. So we look, let's go see. Is the rate that we're paying per member per month too high? Let's just go take a look. Because here's the deal. Once you pay the MCO and they go find the health care for the individual that's on Medicaid, and they pay their expenses, anything they don't use, they keep, goes to their bottom line, and it loses the characteristics of Medicaid. So they could buy airplanes, they could buy new buildings, they could do whatever they want to with it. We have a wait list of those people that are trying to get into care from the MCOs right now. Those that are going through the MCOs are those that are developmentally disabled, they have substance abuse problems, or they have mental health issues. We have such a wait list, and they've accumulated $2 billion to their bottom line. So we said, let's go look at that rate and see how this thing's being calculated, because we want to make sure, we don't want them to go in the hole, but we don't need to be making all this profit either when we got all this money and people that need these services. So when we went and looked at the rate, we found these things. Obviously, when you're calculating the rate, you're going to look at what goes into that rate is how much money did we spend on services, so the expenses. So we went to say, okay, how is this being done? So these 7 MCOs are taking what they say are all their expenses and sending them to an actuary who calculates the rate. Those monies are never tied back to audited financial statements, and we found several who had reported $4 or $5 million over what their audited financial statements said they spent. Okay? DHHS of North Carolina is not getting into this equation at all. Who's really responsible for the program? Then you have encounter data. Encounter data is how many times I went to the doctor or I was served or whatever. And so the encounter data is going straight from the MCO to the actuary who's calculating the rate. Nobody is checking behind them to see if the encounter data is accurate. And then you have member month data, which is how many months out of the year was I on Medicaid. And that information has been going directly from the MCO who's getting the rate paid to them. It's going directly from the MCO to the actuary. Now the actuary takes all this data and they use their computations and their standards and their whatever, and they come up with the rate. When they calculate the rate, they certify back to the federal government, I calculated the rate in accordance with standards of my profession, and I ain't responsible for the accuracy, the reliability, or the completeness of any of these numbers. Now ain't that something? Ain't that something? So all the information to calculate the rates are going from the MCO who benefits to the actuary, and the actuary says, I ain't responsible for any of these numbers. I'm just running some computations here in accordance with the standards. And I had an actuary to audit the actuary, and the actuary was following his standards, did what he was supposed to do, but none of the data that he was using was determined to be accurate, reliable, or complete. Now we've got another $6 or $7 billion that we are going to MCOs for the vast majority of our Medicaid expenditures. Yet the process for calculating the rates, again, are not good. We're not sure the accuracy of all the data that's being used for these rates. So we've taken all this information back to DHHS, told the General Assembly, and what we hope, and we'll be checking on this, is whether or not DHHS puts into practice, and they've come up with all these. Yes, we'll start verifying the underlying data, the expenses, we'll tie them back to financial statements that have been audited. We will look at encounter data and reconcile them. We will look at the per member per month and reconcile that. But again, if these rates are not calculated appropriately, once we spend this money with the MCOs and they don't spend it, it goes directly to their bottom line to be spent any way they want. The other thing I'll remind you about Medicaid money, for every dollar that is spent on Medicaid, 65 cents is federal, still our tax dollars, and 35 cents on the dollar comes straight out of our Raleigh appropriated pots, which means can't use it for education, can't use it for roads, can't do anything with it if it's being misused in Medicaid. The last thing I want to talk about, my investigative unit. So the state statute requires that we have a hotline so that people that think that state monies are being misappropriated, that people aren't being good stewards of the state dollars or federal dollars that pass through the state of North Carolina, they can call my hotline and report allegations. This extends to not only all the organizations that I named, but I have jurisdiction over local governmental units also. Now, I'm going to remind you, your cities, your counties, your school boards, your water and sewer authorities, your tourism authorities, all of them are getting an audit annually, but they're only getting a financial statement audit. And I told you the use of that and what it means. So fraud can go on right under the noses of your auditors. Now I'll just remind y'all of this too. I'll say this, I don't remind you. Say this, that when I found out about the Register of Deeds embezzlements, I immediately said the auditor for Wake County missed something. And I have jurisdiction, I have the authority to go look at the work papers of any CPA who's done work on an organization that receives state money or federal money, passes through the state, goes to them. So immediately I send a couple of my auditors over to look at the work papers for the CPAs who did the audit on Wake County. They'd done it by the book. They had absolutely done their work by the book. So I cannot stress on you enough that when you have a financial statement audit, fraud, wasteful spending can still go on. So we have hotline tips that come into our office. We get about 800 a year that we have to work through and decide if these are allegations that we need to move on. So for every allegation or set of allegations that come in the door, and now mind you, when we do an investigation, we're zoning in on the allegation, not so much looking at the whole organization, unless the allegations cover the whole organization. But we take a look at these allegations. We do a preliminary investigation to decide, does this look like something we need to move forward with or not? And that comes into a stop or go decision. Now, you can imagine that when I get an allegation with 2 or 3 improper credit card use, or that somebody's driving their vehicle back and forth to home and not counting the miles as commuter miles. So allegations like that are much easier and quicker to work through. But when I get as many as 60, 70 allegations on one organization, it takes a while to work through those. And in those cases, we sit down as a team and look at all 60 or 70 allegations, and we prioritize them from most egregious to least egregious. And then we work on those that absolutely have to be, because sometimes when you take care of some of the most egregious, the least egregious will just take care of themselves. We get calls a lot, and I understand this. People want to know how I brought you this issue, I brought you this tip, how's it going? Well, years ago we made a practice, we don't talk about, number one, when the people call, we don't even confirm or deny that we're doing an investigation. That's important because I said we get 800 of these tips a year. And a lot of times if you put out that you're doing an investigation on somebody or some place or something, the newspapers will pick that up. Names get all dirty, didn't find anything. The fact that we didn't find anything shows up on page 10. Okay? So we're careful not to make sure that people's names are not, or organizations' names are not muddied. So that's why we don't discuss whether or not we're doing an investigation or not. But I will stand here today and promise you that every allegation that we get is thoroughly vetted, and we have a phenomenal team of investigators, and we can't afford to make any mistakes, so what we do is very thorough, but it takes time. So again, I get that people can be frustrated about not knowing where the investigation, or even if there's an investigation going on, or sometimes when we show up, people know we're there just cause rumors spread, saw the auditor, so we know they're here. And even at that, even though I run into somebody and they'll say, well, the state auditor was here, and then I'll get a phone call and say, were you really there? And I'll say, I neither confirm nor deny. Don't believe your lying eyes. No, I'm just kidding. But just wanting you to understand that these investigations, particularly when there are numerous allegations that have got to be worked through, and very time intensive, some of them very tedious, but I can promise you we are taking them and vetting them well, and then looking at the most egregious to the least, and then working on them in that order. Also, I'll tell you, with the State Auditor's Office, again, I like to talk about the fact that we live in a glass house and we throw stones. State Auditor's Office, everything that we do is budgeted. Every audit that we do is budgeted. Every investigation that we do is budgeted. There's a deadline for when it's supposed to be finished. And we hold our staff accountable that every year. So what we write others up for, we make sure that we ourselves are not guilty of. So.
What is Rotary? We're a network of people like you. In fact, we're the original social network. More than 1 million of us live just about everywhere you can think of. And we mean everywhere. We get together to exchange ideas, grow our businesses, and make new friends. We volunteer to help our own communities or someone else's. We're right around the corner. Come join us. The name is Rotary. Rotary International.